Yeah, Ship Plus is an interesting one for me because the ships, again, partially because of the amount of work that goes into designing the look of the ships, what the ships do, the systems, and in the back of your mind you're always thinking that these are epic things, kilometre-long, cruise of 1,000. And so the idea that they're all kind of multiple versions of the same thing doesn't kind of sit right. So the ships themselves are pretty much all individual, but there is some overlap in what they do. So we built the prototype, and we're building the current game with 6 original ships. Now they can be described as classes, or they can be broken into types. If you want the most basic way of looking at them is that there's a sense of scale within these. So the largest ship, we have the flagship, which is has been created at something like 1,500 meters. Then you have the medium-sized attack craft, which is the hunter, the sniper, and the assassin, which are around, little short, around 1 kilometer, 900 meters. Actually, probably just over 1 kilometer. So they're medium-scale ships, and they're generally all sort of damage dealers, really. Their job is to destroy other ships, whereas the large ship, the flagship, is much more of a crowd control sort of bait ship. And then the final 2 are the smallest 2, which are the frigate and the disruptor, and their job is support. One's a debuff healer, and the other is very involved in map control and controlling parts of the map. But these are sort of unique versions of what those ships would be. We will have a lot of damage dealers. We'll have a lot of ranged damage dealers. So whereas we have the sniper, which is very much prefers to attack from distance and doesn't want anybody to get close to him, we'll have a lot of those, but they won't be all the same. A good example of that is we're intending to make a massive railgun ship where the gun is not a turret on the ship, and it's a big turret on the sniper, but is essentially the ship itself. So the ship has to orientate to take the shot, which means you're at huge risk if you get closed, but you deal so much more damage. But those ships will look different, feel different, have different supporting systems. They'll actually be incredibly different ships to fly. And I think it's that approach where the ships, ideally every ship you get should have a different play experience, and you should value it for that.
Well, I mean, tactics and strategies, you know, is a big one, right? Because we kind of look at those 2 words on sort of different levels of the game. It's probably not fair to say, but with the way we work, it's like tactics is local, and strategy is your overall team play. And the thing about the game is that, yes, you know, we've talked about things that you can do with all your weapon systems, and the fact that your shots are skilled, and there's going to be, you know, lots of things in the moment-to-moment combat. We've also got the overall strategy. We really want to make the team tightly bonded and playing together, and you know, not feeling like, you know, a bunch of loners that are just trying to work out how they should work together. So I mean, that's hard, right? So that's going to take some work, and it's going to be all about the classes and how they work together, and doing things we've seen in other games where you actually have you know, going into the lobby and drafting together and making sure you've got a good team before you go into a battle. Things like that's going to be important. But when you get into the game itself, our map is going to be a lot about strategy and playing together as a team, because we actually have like a sector-like gameplay, which means that you are in bubbles of space, and actually the team can walk between those bubbles of space, and you don't know where the other team might be or where they might have a ship. Within that as well, there's obviously cover and concealment and so on. But actually that means that, you know, if we sent off most of our fleet to the left, one up the middle, one up to the right, then that means that you might bluff, or they might come across the rest of their team, and actually moving strategically around this map like a board game, moving your pieces like a general pushing his pieces around as a team.
Yeah, I think it's important on that point, because obviously a lot of games have the ability to jump between locations, but one of the things we found, actually, we know from making space games before, is geometry in space, creating that perfectly choreographed multiplayer map with the choke points and areas and everything else it's you know, one of the most defined skills in games, and when you get it right, it's awesome. But you stick that in space, and suddenly all those well-crafted barriers can be just flown over, flown under, taken around. So that idea of breaking space into different areas, and to clarify this, they're not just different rooms in the same map. These are separate areas of space. They're different worlds, different whatever. You're moving between these chunks of space, and that your single arena that your teams battle against is made up of about 5 of these. And these locations can be radically different. We can have different concealment values, different spotting values within them. But simply because you have these areas, the level of strategy involved in exploring those, finding the enemy, trapping the enemy, holding the enemy, keeping your line, taking command of strategically important areas of the map, suddenly adds another layer because you're isolated automatically from your friends. If you're in a different sector, if you're in the wrong place and they get run over, there's not a lot you can do about it. So you need to be very careful about your position within the world and reacting to what happens within those sectors around.
And the sectors themselves, as Jim mentioned in there, they will have objectives within them, and those objectives will change up the gameplay as well. There's more detail on that coming as we evolve it, because I think that's one that we're iterating on from the prototype. But that means that the game will be dynamic based upon what you do within those sectors as well, not just combat but other things too.
But yeah, I mean that kind of covers the strategy, which is the overarching game, the control of the arena winning. But kind of the thing you mentioned before, which was tactics, which is the what you do when opposing another ship. The ideal scenario we strive for is that the abilities that we give the ship always give you options, that you always have something you can do. And one of my favourite examples of tactics in the game is, because we have a sector-based map, there's a possibility that the enemy managed to break through and try to backdoor your base. So the ships are equipped with an emergency warp home, basically, that takes them back to their base to try and defend it. It's got a massive cooldown. You don't want to use it unless you have to. People often use it just to get out of a battle, but then they can't warp home if their base is backdoored, and it becomes a strategic decision. But what we have seen is one of the ships has a blink that people will be familiar with from other games that allows the hunter to leap instantly across a distance and close distances because it's a close attack ship. We were playing, and Dan apparently warped home because we were capturing his base. I was on him, I had him, it was an instant kill, and it looked like he warped home to deal with base and get out of my kill shot. So I went off for another target. Dan hadn't walked home, he'd blinked behind me, took me out and got the kill. And it was just that use, that dummy warp home that he did with the blink that just came out of nowhere, and it's sort of that use of tactics within a battle situation that we want to see lots of.